Number 1. The Dark Space. When I was a teenager, I got myself a job in a drive-in theater. That doesn't mean that this story is really old, though. It happened only 5 years ago. We had the only drive-in theater left in our area. Therefore, it was generally pretty busy, especially right in the smack dab middle of summer. I worked in a sort of security usher sort of position. This meant I had to help direct the cars out of the lot after the end of the second movie. And thus I was generally one of the very last people to leave the theater at the end of the night. That never bothered me, really. I had always been a bit of a night owl anyway. My parents, though, didn't get the summer off, and I didn't have a car of my own yet. So, although they would drop me off for work, I always had to walk home. It wasn't really that big of a deal, because it wasn't that long of a walk. I never asked anyone to drive me home because it took me less than an hour just to walk. My home was on the other side of town. But there is one part that I really didn't like. There was a road with a lot of trees on both sides, and the branches hung over the top of the road. And for a short while you were walking, it was pitch black. Literally, there were times when I actually did bring my hand up to my face and I couldn't see it. I don't know. I think we all like to think and to tell others that we are not scared of the dark. But there's the dark, and then there's the dark. When you can't see anything at all, then I think you're much more likely to be scared, simply because people rely on their vision so much. When this story happened, I was working my second year at the drive-thru, so I had become pretty much used to walking through that area. I really wasn't scared of it anymore, and although I didn't care for the lack of sight for a short period of time, the walk home had become rather routine. This night was pretty hot. I was eager to get off work so I could walk home, take a shower, and maybe play a couple video games before I headed to bed. And when I did, I was sort of in my own little world. I usually used the time that I was walking to think about what my future would be like and such. I dreamed a lot about going to college. Mostly now, though, I was thinking about when I'd finally have saved up so much money that I would be able to get a car. So anyhow, I was really sweating pretty bad as I began walking down that really dark street. I was listening to music on my phone. This was a pretty big change from the way that I used to do things. Hell, when I originally walked down the street, I would have to listen for every possible sound, scared that someone was coming up behind me. That apprehension really continued for a really long time, but by the end of that first summer, I was no longer doing that. I had been halfway down the street when I saw some headlights coming in my direction. I was walking on the pavement, but stepped off onto the side of the street to let the car go by. However, it didn't go by. The car stopped, and I was surprised to see my dad. He normally got up for work at 6 a.m., so seeing him at around 3 a.m. was really weird. He told me to hurry up and get in the car. When I was in the car, he turned and began driving home. When I asked why he had come out to get me, he explained he had gotten a phone call. Another teenager in the area had been murdered, and the killer hadn't been caught. I had already left work to come home, so he came out to get me. But the worst part happened when my dad took out the phone and called 911. He explained that he had come out to pick his son up from work. He mentioned where he was when he picked me up, and he said that as he was coming down the road, he saw a large man coming up behind his son, and that the man quickly fled into the trees before my father stopped the car. I sat there beside my father with my mouth hanging open. I mean, I have no way of knowing if the guy my father saw was the killer or not, but just the possibility that it may have been was terrifying. I had always insisted that I work and buy my own car, but the next day my father bought the car I wanted for me and had me pay him in installments. I was okay with it because I never wanted to walk down that dark road again. Number 2. Hitchhiking Encounter. I'm not sure how scary you'll find this story. It might not seem scary hearing it, but I asked you to put yourself in my shoes while you read it. I think once you do, you will probably understand how this was easily the most terrifying thing to ever happen to me. I moved out of my parents' house pretty quickly, and immediately after I turned 18 years old. I was able to find myself a nice little studio apartment because I wanted to live alone. It was in an old building, and I'm sure that most of the units in the building were probably empty. And that's not really important though, I guess. I just wanted to let you know how I was able to live on my own right out of my parents' house. The only problem was my job. I got myself a job working at a fast food restaurant in a neighboring town. I didn't have a car, but I could always take a bus to work. However, when I worked nights, which was often, I had a nice 5-mile walk home. This was a hot summer night. I remember it for that and other reasons. After closing up the store, I wasn't too eager to leave the air conditioning, but I also figured the sooner I got started, the sooner I'd be back to my apartment, and then I could put my feet up. I was sweating pretty badly and walking along the gravel side of the highway. I heard a car coming up and I turned around to look at it. I walked with traffic, not against it, so I always looked back when I heard a car coming. And this car came, and it pulled onto the side of the road about 20 feet behind me. I wasn't positive, but I assumed the car was offering me a ride. It happened every now and then, but I wasn't 100% sure. When I turned as if to keep walking, the car honked at me. At that point, whether the car was offering me a ride or not, I at least knew that the driver wanted my attention for some reason, so I turned and took a step to walk towards the car. However, when I did, the car jumped forward, just a little bit. I immediately stopped in my tracks. Then, he started revving up his engine. I then attempted to step towards his car once again, but once again, he let off the brake a little, and the car jumped forward, just a little before once again stopping. Now, I pretty much knew the guy was fucking with me, or at least I hoped that was all he was doing. I turned around and was about to start walking home again. However, I only took a couple of steps before he once again let off the brake before suddenly stopping. When I tried walking away a second time, he repeated the action. I didn't know what to do at this point. Part of me thought this was probably some stupid teenager who had his dad's car and was trying to get a good laugh. But I also wasn't sure that I could even take that chance. Regardless, whether I tried to step towards the car or away from it, he seemed like he was ready to hit me either way. And then something weird happened. I heard a siren off in the distance. Almost immediately, the car jumped forward and I jumped out of the way. However, even if I hadn't jumped, I doubt it would have even come close to hitting me. The car took off down the street, and I watched a police car coming down the street as well. I can only assume that either the cop car was after the car, or the owner of the car only assumed that it was. I don't know. Either way, at least I was done with it. If the cop car pulled the car over, I didn't see it on my walk. I made it the rest of the walk home without seeing anything. I didn't hear about anything happening, I never saw the car again, and I never had an experience like that ever again. Number 3. The park. When I was in high school, I took to spending a lot of time at my best friend's house after school. This was a while back. And he had a Sega Genesis, which was a bit of a big deal at the time. I'd tell my parents that I'd be over there for homework, not that they really cared. They didn't pay much attention to what I did anyway. During the summertime, they paid even less attention, and I would spend all day there, normally not going home until late at night, and really only to go to bed. The town I grew up in wasn't really that large. It was definitely one of those sunset towns, though. I mean, occasionally you'd have teenagers cruising around in their cars, but the town did have a curfew. Not that I cared. I'd never once been picked up for it, but usually when I was out walking, the streets were pretty empty. I would normally cut through the park in the middle of the town also. It had some benches, a picnic table or two. Mainly though, it was just a lot of trees and a trail. Well, it was supposed to be a bike trail, but I didn't mind walking along it. This took place in the summer when I was 16 years old. I'd been over at my best friend's house all day. He was falling asleep while I was playing video games. I guess it was getting on my nerves a bit. It was around 2 a.m., but that wasn't late as far as I was concerned. Finally, after dozing for a while, he decided to get up and go to bed. He always invited me to sleep on the couch, but I honestly didn't want to. I wasn't good at that sort of thing. I had to have my own bed to sleep in. So he went to bed, and I decided to head on home. It was a very still night, and that wasn't just the wind, really. I mean, completely still. There wasn't a single cloud in the entire sky. I didn't hear any crickets or any frogs or anything. It was just still. And yeah, that was really pretty creepy. I never did get creeped out before when I took this walk. If I did, I definitely would not ever cut through the non-lit park. But I cut through the park and was walking along the bike trail. As I got deeper down the trail, I thought I heard some sort of whistling sound. It could have been anything, really. Normally, it wasn't as quiet or still as it was that night, so it could have been a common sound that was normally muffled. But I stopped when I could have sworn I heard a human whisper up ahead of me. I cocked my head to the side to try and hear better, and I did hear better, and what I heard absolutely terrified me. He must have heard us. Get him! Next thing I knew, 2 big forms came out from the trees in front of me. I'm sure that everything that happened from that point happened in a split second, but it didn't seem that way to me. I heard the sound of a switchblade, and the 2 guys began moving quickly in my direction. I turned and ran. I didn't even mean to do it, it just happened. And I heard the 2 guys coming after me. I tried to run back to the beginning of the trail, so I could then run back to my friend's house. I assumed maybe the 2 guys were muggers. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my wallet, and threw it back at them. It had some cash in it and an emergency credit card, none of which meant more to me than my health. That didn't stop the guys, though. They kept coming right after me. At the end of the trail, I ran into the neighborhood. Rather than going all the way back to my friend's house, though, I ran to the very first door. I began screaming and pounding on the door, yelling that someone was coming after me with a knife, and a senior gentleman came and opened the door in his robe. At first, he seemed to think I was playing a prank, but I think he saw the 2 guys, and he let me in. We called the police. They didn't pick up the guys then, but they were stupid enough to try and use the credit card after it was reported stolen. They ended up being 2 guys from my school who knew my parents had money and knew I cut through that park every night. However, it was obvious by how they continued to chase me that they weren't only interested in the money. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. If you didn't get my community discussion message, I want to apologize for not getting the Tuesday live reading stream going. I've been having a pain in the back of my head and neck, and I laid down for a nap, and the pain was so bad it was really impossible for me to get back up in time. If you want to read print versions of these stories, you can do that at the Killer Orange Cat subreddit. In the meantime, if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please consider subscribing by using the button below, or using the icon of Ichigo the cat that will appear at the end of this closing. Feel free to leave me a comment to let me know what you think of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. You can always follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter using the links in the description. If you have a story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please feel free to submit it to the address provided in the description. My main requirement is that the story is original, meaning it has not yet been read on any other YouTube channel. And please, whatever you do, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.